Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of /Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, coding with no specification, the management said you don't need a specification, you are being paid to use your brain as well as to code. A very frustrating ticket. We've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. Hello, are you there? Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Coding with no specification, the management said you don't need a specification, you are being paid to use your brain as well as to code. So as a senior software developer, with some 12 years of experience at that point, I was hired to lead a minor group of juniors for a smallish company, 30 to 40 employees. First hint that there might be problems ahead dealing with the management of this particular company was the info I got that the entire previous dev team had rage quit and additionally were being sued by the company. My first task was to reverse engineer VBA scripts embedded in an Excel document made by a competing company. The idea was to import into our database everything as is, in string format mostly. The business rules, validations, were implemented within the said Excel template and not in our application. Our application was to simply import user data straight into our data store, no validation, no transformation, and then to export it into a new Excel. This new Excel would then be distributed to the clients who would then make adjustments to the data, that at this point would pass through validations implemented within the Excel document. As you can see, the idea, in its entirety, was terrible. The real winner came shortly thereafter as the sole junior, who had been working on an app called AppX, for the purposes of this article, suddenly quit. The reason he quit was he knew what the true state of application had been at that point and therefore was 100% certain he could not deliver what was needed to avoid being sued by the client. The guy was a student at the time he was hired by the company to create a C# application. The problem was he was studying Java. The management of this company was completely oblivious to such nuances. Before he left, he was tasked to leave behind at least some documentation, which he did, but since he was unsupervised, the company could not spare anyone at that time to take a look at the documentation and see if it's okay, so he simply took the screenshots of all the user forms and named them UI1, UI2, etc. The documentation was, therefore, completely useless. At this point, I was given first actual tasks on the AppX. The task was to basically change how the entire application worked in like a 4 weeks' time, whilst simultaneously working on other projects. The application was a bit hard to navigate through. It seemed I could not find any repository classes, those are usually used to connect to the data store, but I said to myself, hey, the guy was a junior, he probably hid all his SQL statements somewhere, so no problem, I will find where the SQL was sooner or later. The data was present on the front end, the list of users, the list of projects, so stuff seemed to function normally. I was told the application had been in full production for approximately a year, so I was not yet alarmed by not being able to immediately find the SQL. Soon thereafter, I needed to rework how the list of projects were displayed to admin users. I could see the list of projects, but the database was empty, no tables, no projects, no nothing. Then it dawned on me. So I did a full find all on the entire project and used one of the project names as search criteria and bingo. The entire list was there in HTML, hard-coded. Obviously the entire app was not, at that moment, connected to a data store, and this is how it had been working in production for at least a year. All exceptions were being overridden to return a success message, so all testers, on both sides, were completely fooled by this. All of the deletes and updates seemed to be working. jQuery had made sure inserts looked semi-okay as well. Okay, so now I was aware of the full extent of the problem at hand. I basically needed to connect the app to the data store, featuring some 200-ish UI forms. The management said, how hard can that be for a senior developer? It's a simple task, and under normal circumstances that would be true. You simply take the specification, model the database as per normalization rules, create repository layer, ORM, and design the needed queries. The problem was the entire thing had to be completed in like 3 weeks. Okay, fine, I said, give me the specification so I can get started. The sooner I get started, the sooner we will know how quickly the task can be accomplished on one senior developer. So they said, We don't have the specification, our former employee had it, in his Outlook inbox, and he left. There's no specification, but a senior developer should not need to be told everything. We expect you to think as well as to act, all within the previously agreed time constraints. The usual managerial mumbo-jumbo when they have no clue whatsoever what they are doing, but are being pressed by impending doom. So I asked, okay, well, can't the PM visit the client and ask what needs to be done? No, the client must not find out that the application has not been finished, it is in production after all. If we were to begin asking such question at this point, we would end up being sued. So I said, okay, so let us sum this up real quick. The application is a complete fake, it's not connected to an actual data store, the specification is irrevocably gone, and the client thinks that the application is 99% complete and is willing to sue if we don't deliver in 2 weeks. Yes, but that should not be a problem for a senior developer, right? We are paying you after all? Actually, several payments were being late at that moment in time. Right, I immediately begun looking for a new job, and the following 2 weeks had passed with no real work being done, so the pressure mounted. I started receiving late-night mails along the lines of, will we have a working sample delivered to test tomorrow morning? So I replied no. With kind regards, XY. At the same time, the company brought in a new managing director to fix things, to discipline people, and to make things work. At that point it was really quite obvious the company was gonna burn down, Hollywood style. The PM begun arriving at work at 1400 hours, proceeding directly to nearby cafe, to continue his drinking. He needed to be properly boozed up before even talking to me, because he didn't have a feeling that I was taking this whole thing seriously enough, and that I would cause the company to burn, but at the same time was unable to exert pressure to make me work 120 hours/week. The overtime was unpaid. Right about that point in time, the time for me to go on vacation came, lest the vacation days be lost. The laws in my country state that if you don't consume your paid vacation time by a certain date, the vacation is permanently lost, so I chose to go on vacation instead of working for the company. That was the final straw. 1 week into my paid vacation I got summoned to the office, and got fired for destroying the company's good name, and an excellent project that had been successful in production up to that point. After all, the client had signed the handover, the testers on both sides signed the acceptance documents. A colleague from the other department, SysOps, jumped from his balcony. Another colleague threw an ashtray at a waiter at the local bar. Entire sales and marketing team left. Software development department got closed. The company's assets got frozen. The end. A very frustrating ticket. This is my first submission and I have no excuse for grammar, typing errors, or the other things that seem to make for a preface here. Many years ago, when band printers and AS400s were a thing, a customer had an intermittent issue where their printer would cease to deliver reams of paper filled with columns of text and figures that no one would read and start to deliver page upon page of random characters that no one could read. Typically, error would occur, customer calls up, tech dispatched who finds no fault. Tech attempts varied steps involving mechanical tools and dust removal agents of the homing sensors and other diagnostics based on the hyper-informative 7-segment LED display on the main board that said 0, checked the connection to the serial comms device was extra snug, and then stood around for a suitable length of time observing the printer operation before leaving with the advice to call again if, when, it happened next time. It would occur for a couple of days, then nothing for a week or two. No real discernible pattern. Now this was in the office of some stockbrokers or accountants, some mob who passed for royalty in early 90s Sydney, and their office was in a tower with views over Sydney Harbour, and in particular Circular Quay. For those of you who have not been blessed with a visit to our beautiful harbour city, Circular Quay is the bit between the Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House where you may have seen the New Year's fireworks broadcast from. It also has the international passenger terminal where cruise ships dock. They were just P&O ocean liners back then. The printer was in a small room with a window that overlooked this view, so it was not an unpleasant spot to gaze from while observing the printer with its snugly connected serial cable into the serial comms device, while the printer disgorged perfectly aligned columns of text on sheet after sheet of heavily processed tree. Time passed and, though there had been a report or two in the meantime, a month later I caught this ticket again and returned to spread my tools out to give the impression I could help. Check the diagnostics on the hyper-informative 7-segment LED display on the main board, still 0, polished the capacitors, read a story to the serial comms unit and settled in to observe, when I noticed it was the same ship docked as last time I was there. To cut this short, too late you say, some other techs, and I agreed that it was possible the radar of the ship was interfering with the comms to the printer and screwing the data flow, and that the radar would only be active on arrival and departure, but not while docked. The next time the customer called to report the issue, they confirmed the piano saucy sailor was back in port, and I suggested they needed to get their comms people to get a better shielded link or comms device in there. I'm assuming that worked as the calls for that issue stopped. We've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. Naively, I thought that some of the PEBCAC stories on here were somewhat uncommon. Naively. I've sent some brand new, in-box monitors out for some WFH employees. Of the 10 sent out, 2 of them called in, miffed at the new monitors and requesting new ones. I'll review one of the calls. $user is user, and on $SR. $user, I cannot believe this thing is broken out of the box. You have to send a new one out, I bet the mail guy dropped it and broke it. $SR, let me remote connect and see what's going on. Less than a minute being connected, the device does not see the monitor attached. $SR, looks like the computer doesn't see it. Does the power button on the monitor have a backlight at all? $user, I don't think so, yeah, I'm pressing it and it's not changing colors. $SR, okay, the monitor, is it plugged into the wall? $user, no. That's not a thing, my USB monitor plugged right into my computer. $SR, oh, it's a thing. Do you have the extra cable from the original box? $user, no. $SR. This sums it up, really. I've had my first call in a long time that made me literally facepalm. Happy Monday. The second user was the same issue, but they had the power cable. Hello, are you there? I'm still green at helpdesk, it has been about a month since I started. Was on a call with a user who could not connect a second monitor to their laptop. During said call, user was dead silent. I checked in and no response. Being in the middle of verification steps, I did not want to hang up as I saw the call was still connected, so I reached out again and again and again. About an hour passes with no progress before I finally ask, "Did you accidentally mute yourself?" Turns out he did, and he was almost yelling at me to get me to respond. He was about to hang up, thinking it was a new FEN issue. Morale of the story: expect the user to do dumb stuff. I didn't and wasted an hour.